Alright guys, TacticalRab again today. I hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. We have a 2-week gap now until the start of the Major 4 qualifiers right at the end of March. In the interim, what are we going to see? Rumours are circulating that roster changes will happen, but what teams will get involved and what specific changes will they decide to make? Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. I thought it was funny this story here from Bryce a couple of months ago when Bryce was talking to Scrappy in challenges and he was saying how awful he thought the full-time pros are, and I was going to wreck them when he came into the league. Took him about 4 months to win his first event in the CDL. Now look, there's a new map releasing in 2 days time. This break we now have, so the Major ended a couple of days ago. I think it's the 31st of March when the qualifiers for Major 4 get underway, so a 2-week break here now, which makes sense given it's pretty much halfway through the season. 3 majors down, 2 majors to go, but then of course the World Championship afterwards. And this is the time for not only teams to make changes if they actually want to try and win the World Championship, but also for hopefully some map mode combination changes to go on as well. Now we know Fortress Control, that's been a big talking point. We'll come back to that in a second. There is a new map arriving in a couple of days. I know there's been some kind of leaks about what it's going to look like, and look, I don't know if it's going to play well at all, but this is now the time for the pros to go away and decide, alright, let's try and get rid of Fortress. What can we do instead? Or if this new map arrives, there is a chance. When there's only a 1-week gap between the Major and then the next set of qualifiers, there isn't really enough time. There is some time to make changes still, but there isn't maybe enough time to make changes to the actual game itself. Now a 2-week gap does give that possibility, so that's certainly, well, hopefully something that might well happen. Also an update on esports earnings. To know that the earnings of course are somewhat inflated in modern times compared to what some of the OGs were able to make from tournaments, but Simp actually overtakes Arcitys and is under $800 away from where Crimsix is in terms of all-time earnings. Sellers overtaken Scump, Slasher has overtaken Formal, Shotzzy has got past Bance, Priester and iLLeY, and CleanX becomes the 3rd EU pro after Bance and Cammy to hit $500,000 earned from tourneys. Of course, you know, tourney inflation, other inflation factors as well, but that still I thought was rather interesting. Now, JP Krez and others are very keen for Fortress Control to go, and even as JB says here, Fortress is still in the rotation next week Riot. Now, in fairness to OpTic, right, once they started getting rid of Fortress and actually playing in aLLeY or playing a hotel, they seem to do rather better in their controls. I don't really know why they loved Fortress so much, but hopefully it's going to be gone. Scump is very keen, of course, in the replies here to get it gone as well. With any luck, it will be. What is going to come in to replace? I know the pros tried, I think, Mikado control at the start of the season, which may be better. Like, it's something's got to be better in the current map set than what we have on Fortress. I don't, like, look, it's bad, don't get me wrong. I don't actually think it's, like, that bad, to be honest. At least it's more watchable. I think to play, it's terrible, but it does end quite quickly sometimes. Like, okay, Gavutu last year on Vanguard, in my opinion, I had a much worse time watching that map than I do Fortress. Yes, Fortress is bad, but Gavutu was a disaster. In my opinion, this is probably a hot take, but I think it was an absolute disaster because that map would last 15 minutes because they would always get A, and then it would take like so long for them just to lose the offense anyway. And like, at least on Fortress, the occasional offense is won sometimes, as we saw against Vegas, because they're terrible. Boston took them down on an offense. They couldn't even hold on to their defenses on that map, which is obviously so overpowered, but at least some of the defenses are so dominant that they end in like 30 seconds and you can go on to the next round and to the next map. So that's the only advantage that I give Fortress Control, but it's still got to go in an ideal world. And whether that's Farm 18, which they trialed but said was bad, whether that's Mikado, surely something's got to be better, or this new map that's arriving will hopefully be better as well, and the pros can deal with that one. Also wanted to mention this from JP, of course, the sole coach analyst right now for the OpTic Texas team, talking about the back and forth on coaching staffs either being totally useless and then being entirely necessary depending on the situation, never fails to make me laugh. And this is a fair point, right? I think the community flip-flopped a lot on, okay, like when Ramo got kind of removed as the head coach, it was like, oh yeah, don't need a coach anymore, Dashy's got it covered, then OpTic looked good. Then when they started to make some serious mistakes, it's like, oh no, you do need a coach and it's not going to work. And then all of a sudden now OpTic have done well again at the Major, despite not looking so good early on. It's like, oh, maybe they don't need a coach anymore. So it's a bit of a weird one. To me, it's like, look, you want the players to have the freedom, but that doesn't necessarily mean that having an extra pair of eyes is not important. We saw Karma the other day say that he might be interested in doing it. I don't think Karma's going to be there every day for every single set of scrims, but Karma could be there to give some insight onto specific situations, to just, you know, have another pair of eyes on it, because look at the top teams, they've got 3-4 coaches a lot of the time. Toronto, that's the case over there. FaZe, that's the case over there. A lot of the teams have a big back-end staff, and that's one advantage those teams have over OpTic, I think, especially how it is nowadays with the fine margins. Another kind of eye on the fall really is potentially going to help OpTic. So I still think it's valuable, even if they aren't necessarily doing the same thing that, you know, Rammer might have been when he was on the team previously. But still a question to be answered over the coming days with that one. But obviously, you know, I thought it was pretty impressive here from Ghosty that his numbers maybe aren't necessarily reflected on the stat sheets, but individually their success in hardpoint has gone up rapidly. This is their hardpoint win percentage from stage 2, 44%, to with Ghosty 70%, and Team KD has expanded a lot as well. So definitely we saw JP giving a lot of credit to Ghosty yesterday for their success, and I think for good reason. And looking at their overall numbers, OpTic are nearly at 60% overall hardpoint win rate this season, despite starting off very poorly. Stage 2 is pretty bad for them as well, but yes, in stage 3, 70% win rate. That's brought it up to the second highest in the league, just behind Seattle. And look at FaZe, right? They're the 8th best hardpoint team this whole season. Only 45.8% of them they've won. They've been carried hard by their search and destroy. I don't expect their search to retain a 95% win rate as it is at the moment. It's going to go down to, you know, even 75% or something like that. They're going to get exposed even more if their hardpoint remains as it is. FaZe should be a top 3 hardpoint team based on their ability, but they're down here behind Ravens in hardpoint win percentage this season, which is absolutely absurd. Now look, in fairness, because FaZe make it deep in tourneys, they do play better teams when they get there, whereas Ravens get first rounded and they play a random selection of online qualifiers, such that you can understand why their percentages may be somewhat higher. But still, not good for FaZe, right? Even against the top teams, you want to be going at least 50-50, and those numbers are certainly a concern for that team. So 2 weeks now until the next set of qualifiers start up once again, and what are we going to see in the interim? Of course, Toronto aren't going to do anything, they just won the entire event, and plenty of teams won't make any changes, right? Including a lot of these teams on the list right here. Pretty crazy, right? That in the last 10 events in the CDL, 7 franchises have won said 10 events. A couple of wins for LA Thieves, a couple of wins for Toronto, but apart from a couple of wins for New York Subliners, but apart from that, it's all been different teams from the kickoff last year, the Prime last year, through to the present day. And actually, out of the events so far this season, out of the 12 teams in the league, 6 of them have made a grand final. Of course, FaZe, Thieves, Subliners, even Surge right at the start of the season at Major 1. They played the Subliners there. Of course, OpTic Toronto was the most recent one, so kind of remarkable, right, that out of the 3 tournaments so far, every tourney has had 2 entirely different teams in the grand final. Now, is that going to continue? I don't think it is, right? We're going to see a lot of repeats, I think, from now to the rest of the season. Will there be any of these other teams that make it? I would say arguably not, especially as they currently stand. And that is the thing. Which of these teams need to decide to make a change? And even among the ones that did make finals, do they need to make a change now anyway? Because the Subliners have gone from getting top 1 to going, I think, top 8 and then top 12. They've regressed significantly. The potency of their AR duo against the majority of the league hasn't really been there. Priester hasn't been able to maintain the level that he was at right at the start of the season. I still think the Hydra Kismet duo works. I still think the Skies thing is fine. Priester to me is where the question might be raised about the Subliners, just because at the start of the season he was great. Now he's not so great, so they're not doing so well, and Priester was always kind of the last man on this team when it was initially formed. Whether there's any upgrades there, bit of a question for you guys. Surge to me are an interesting one, right, because they made a great run at this stage, all things considered. They looked phenomenal in stage 3, but again, largely helped by Mr. Pred. LePred was out of control this stage. He had one of the best individual stages you're ever going to see from a player in Search and Destroy. It was incredible, and they still somehow only got top 6 of the tournament. Yes, they played some pretty, well, difficult matches. They, of course, lost to FaZe Game 5 round 11. Bit of a hip-fired cheese from Simp that took them over the line in that one, and then they lost to a hot OpTic team in front of the home crowd and loses. It's understandable, but at the same time, you know, Mack had a really rough series. Accuracy, despite being pretty good the majority of this stage, kind of fell short maybe when it mattered in that sense. So that's where the questions are. Again, when push came to shove, and when the talent of Pred and Sid was there to potentially get them over the line and playing at a very high level of performance, it still wasn't enough, right? And I know that Surge don't want to make any changes. We know that their coaching staff in Phoenix said we're not making any moves. And in fairness, for 90% of the major, including the qualifiers, it looks like that was a good decision. But then when it comes down to it, they still fall short in the tournament. So there's questions as to whether there's an upgrade for Mack, or I know people say iLLeY for accuracy. To me, I don't really see that working or making too much sense. But there are some options out there. Of course, Standy on Toronto, still on the bench over there, and given their results, I don't imagine they want to bring Standy back anytime soon. So he is probably up for grabs, right? If they weren't doing so well and they were considering maybe do they want to bring him back in, then maybe they'd want to keep him around on the bench. Maybe they still do, but still a buyout there could be potentially working for some teams or another. Even Arcitys reckons, you know, I'm bringing back, of course, this from the Huntsman days back in Modern Warfare. We've got Drazah on the top side right here, and okay, Thieves aren't going to make any changes, FaZe aren't going to make any changes or anything, but LA Guerrillas right there, an interesting candidate, just because it's a team that's teams run out of money, they're getting shut down or sold at the end of the season. But Exceed does tweet this out, and people did wonder whether this is indicative of potentially Exceed getting benched or maybe changes going on in that camp. It's a bit of a weird one, right? Because their team is clearly terrible and they're like top 12 in the league, but will they want to make any changes, right? And what changes would they even potentially be? Is Arcitys okay? Is his hand coming back to normal? Is his swollen hand injury going to get resolved by the time the kind of major cycle begins for Major 4? I don't know. We don't really know the answer to that right now. Assault has been the better of the two ARs on that team, I think, for a little bit of time at this point. JoeDeceives and Exceed have been good, but, just not good enough compared to the level required in this league right now. But still, LA Guerrillas going to pay a buyout for anyone. What's the options there? So, tricky situation for them to figure out what's happening, especially if the team isn't confident in itself, but yet if the organization isn't willing to support them, then it's a little bit tough. Vegas also in an interesting boat to me, and I'll just share the clip in a second of Zuma mentioning that he has heard, or at least I think even Ben implied afterwards that, yeah, he's heard that changes are coming. It's a matter of what changes do occur. And Vegas had a great run this major. They got to top 6, but I think even Scump said on the watch party earlier in the weekend that Clay had come to them and said they went 0-16 in hardpoints in a set of scrims one day. So, like, Vegas delivered on the main stage when it mattered against Thieves and against Guerrillas in that crazy series with Narky and all that. But outside of that, they got bodied by Boston. Their SMG line is still not it, let's be honest here. When Temp turned up as he did Series 1, Series 2, they got over the line, and 2Will's been pretty good, but their Search and Destroy, like, okay, it's got worse, I think, without Prelude. But is TJ good enough in that mode to justify keeping him around? It's a question, because to me, I don't know, especially if Rokkr come and make changes, right? Rokkr are the interesting candidate to me. If they come around, they make changes, they make some serious progress and try and take a step forward, Vegas aren't going to have enough in the tank with this current roster to catch them up. They're 20 points behind as it stands, and that's only because Rokkr got 0 points this entire cycle. That's not going to happen, you'd imagine, going forwards, especially if they try and make changes. So I think Vegas are still a step behind where they need to be to make champs, and, you know, that's their target for the season, whereas other teams is trying to win events, especially if you're the Minnesota Rokkr.
And on top of that, let's stay tuned because I'm expecting some roster changes. So I think we might see some Rostermania going on.
Some overdue roster
I mean,
changes.
what are you saying? Oh, you don't think there's going to be roster changes?
Oh, there's going to be roster changes. I didn't know if you had intel or not.
No, I don't have any intel. I'm just like common sense. Yeah, just expecting roster changes. So stay tuned, man. We're going to be doing a lot more episodes, making a lot more content.
And I thought this is pretty funny as well, right? The fact that Marky B has a higher win percentage this season in terms of map percentage than a lot of the teams in the league. So even higher than Seattle, and then Minnesota. Actually, Vegas and Minnesota have exactly the same map win percentage. Florida, I don't know what you guys think about this team, just because, like, they were okay. They made progress. They obviously beat the subliners, and I still think they're probably slightly better than they were, but they're worse in Search and Destroy, which does hurt them now. I'm not really sure what I think about that Mutineers team, but they probably won't do much else from now to the rest of the season. Their champs' hopes are basically gone anyway. London in the same boat, but I think London are close to being quite good. They put up a good fight against OpTic. They've been pretty good this entire cycle. They just lack the ice factor, right? And Paulx on LAN, I'm not really sure is it, especially because Nasty's now on the flex. I think they need another SMG, to be honest. I'm sure there are options out there. So to me, I would say that for what these teams are intending to achieve, many of these teams, probably 6, 7, 8 teams could improve with a change. And if 6, 7 or 8 teams don't change, I don't think any of those teams are going to win anything from now to the end of the season. So it's a question of what the organization's intending to accomplish. If you're Surge, you know you can win with that roster. If you're Minnesota, you know you want to win with that roster, and it's probably not as it currently stands. But then some of the other teams, their goal is to be trying to make it to the World Championship, which has a different element of what exactly you should do with the team. Also do wonder about the subliners, as I said, whether there's a chance of this team making moves. I don't think they will in the short term, and I feel like it would also be a weird Minnesota Rokkr thing to not make any moves either. But the thing is, for them, they've got a great academy team with players like Fame and Real and these guys over there that have been killing it in challenges, and especially looking at Toronto and seeing what they've done with Scrappy, what they've done with Hicksy. All of the Toronto players were at some point a substitute for the Toronto organization. Like, I think that shows what Minnesota might have to do if they want to take a step forward here. So very much enjoyed to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.